I did a how-to on iron mills. An iron mill or ironworks is a building or site where iron is melted. Below you see a picture of an iron mill. This is a picture from the iron rolling mill in the 1870s by Adolf Menzel. Iron mills also produce steel. One of the tools used in an iron mill is called a blast furnace. I provided a picture below. The purpose of a blast furnace is to chemically reduce and physically convert iron oxides into liquid iron called hot metal. The blast furnace is a huge steel stack lined with refractory brick where iron ore, coke and limestone are dumped into the top, and preheated air is blown into the bottom. The raw materials require 6 to 8 hours to descend to the bottom of the furnace, where they become the final product of liquid slag and liquid iron. These liquid products are drained from the furnace at regular intervals. The hot air that was blown into the bottom of the furnace ascends to the top in 6 to 8 seconds, after going through numerous chemical reactions. Once a blast furnace is started, it will continuously run for 4 to 10 years with only short stops to perform planned maintenance. A foundry is a factory that produces metal castings. Metals are cast into shapes by melting them into liquid, pouring the metal into a mold, and removing the mold, material or casting after the metal has solidified as it cools. I have provided a picture above of a foundry. The process that goes on in iron mills are usually described as hard manual labor, and the conditions are not always ideal. This job, if being worked, can be a difficult one at best. The iron and steel produced are used for a lot of things in everyday life that we may not even know. We just look past them and take them for granted sometimes. This concludes my presentation on iron mills. Thank you.
In 1830 to 1860, it was an exciting time for healthcare. Things were changing rapidly, and social changes greatly impacted women's roles in the field. Although not an American, you cannot talk about nurses without mentioning Florence Nightingale. She changed everything that was thought about nursing, focusing mainly on sanitation. Her insight was asked for during the Civil War to help decrease the death rate for the Norse Army. I actually took the Florence Nightingale oath when I graduated with my LBN. The next woman that I wrote about was Dorothy Dix. She was an advocate for social reform, most notably with mental health. In this chart, you can see many of the kinds of mental health issues that people, mainly women, were admitted for, such as female issues, domestic trouble, or time of life. These kind of admissions were used by husbands as punishment for an unruly wife. This is a tranquilizing chair that was used in hospitals to calm an uncontrollable patient, and they were left for extreme long periods of time. Dorothy Dix works on changing the tide, though, and helped implement what was called moral therapy throughout the nation. Lastly was Elizabeth Blackwell, the first female physician. She was accidentally accepted in medical college due to those voting believing that it was a practical joke, and voted to allow her to attend. She faced many obstacles and discrimination, but graduated despite these. Later, her sister also gained a degree, and they started a medical school for women in New York, and later another one in London. These 3 women were amazing, so please take time and read more about them or watch the videos at the end of each blog about their lives.
The printing press from 1830 to 1865. During this time period, not only were the standards of literature changing, but the means of printing that literature was shifting drastically. The invention of the steam-driven flatbed press for printing books emerged and led to the penny press. This printing press was nicknamed the penny press because you could buy a newspaper for only a penny. During this time, newspapers went for about 6 cents per paper, and therefore many people were thrilled at the idea of being able to purchase such inexpensive reading material. An important man during the penny press era was Benjamin H. Day, founder of the New York Sun. The Sun was the first popular penny paper. Furthermore, because the reading material was cheaper, it gave a chance for all citizens, including the lower class, to be able to be up to date with the news. The printing press also contributed to the reform. The ability of reformers to be able to spread the word about their cause was made possible by many of the same means we use today. The power of the press was growing increasingly and helped the cause for many reformers during the Renaissance.
By the mid-1800s, Americans primarily traveled by walking, horse and carriage, steamships, and canal boats. Many women inventors contributed to improving safety and reducing noise pollution from the trains. Mary Riggins developed a railway crossing gate. Eliza Murphy painted more than a dozen devices used to lubricate railroad car axles and reduce the number of derailments. Mary Walton created a system that cradled the track in a wooden box lined with cotton and filled with sand. This was to reduce noise for elevated railroads in New York City. As the railroads expanded and more tracks were laid, there was a lot of debate over what materials should be used to make the rails. Poor building materials were susceptible to moisture retention from rain and snow, which contributed to weakening the track system. Weakened joints in the track were a particular problem. It was not easy to hold the adjacent ends of the two shallow rails firmly together under the impact of the heavily loaded wheels of a train. Weak joints potentially caused the track to impart a rolling or jumping motion to the train. None of the systems of railway track that were used in the late 1800s escaped weak joints. The Katharine Gibbon double girder lap joint track was invented in order to overcome these defective systems.
A brief history of steel manufacturing. The process of smelting steel is conducted by alloying iron with carbon to produce a sturdier, stronger metal. Before steel, iron was the dominant metal used in the construction of buildings, tools, and railroads, but it lacked a long-lasting ability and needed replacement frequently. With the introduction of the steelmaking process, the use of iron in industrial factories greatly reduced, and steel took its place as the main resource in the building of infrastructure and railroads across the nation. The use of the Bessemer steelmaking process reformed how steel was manufactured and led to the Industrial Revolution in the United States. In 1856, the British engineer Henry Bessemer developed the Bessemer process for making steel. To start the process, the converter is blasted with hot air through a number of air channels at the bottom of the tank that superheats it. The air oxidizes the silicon and manganese impurities within the iron ore inside the converter. The carbon converts into carbon monoxide, which expels out of the top with a blue flame. Once the flame is gone, it means that all the carbon monoxide has escaped, and a carefully prepared homogeneous mixture of silicon and manganese is added to the molten iron mixture in the converter. The constant blast of hot air at the bottom of the converter throughout the process ensures that an even mixture is created within. The product created is molten manganese steel, and the steel is then turned on its side and is poured out of the hole at the top of the converter. The steel is poured into a mold which is strong enough to hold the molten mixture and allows it to be shaped. The Bessemer process pioneered American industrialization in ways that would forever change how the nation would develop. Steel is a much stronger metal than its iron source and is a safer alternative for making a sturdy infrastructure for a newly modernized, developed nation.